Hey everyone, and welcome back to Land of the Lost. I'm Michelle, and I have a couple of interesting articles today. I was digging through my files because I remember reading them, and they were pretty interesting because I've never heard about anything like this, but it has to do with petrified bodies and of famous people that we know. The first one is from 1892, and it's about the body of Wild Bill, disinterred, natural phenomenon, petrified in the Black Hills. So here we go. From the New York Press. Deadwood, South Dakota, September 16th. The waters of the Black Hills have peculiar properties of petrification. When the Pioneer Cemetery in this city was recently dug up and the bodies removed to the present cemetery on Mount Moriah, a large number of the bodies were found to be partly petrified. The remains of Wild Bill J.B. Hickock were thoroughly petrified. Another body recently found in the celebrated Wind Cave of the Hills, 12 miles north of Hot Springs, is now on exhibit at Lincoln, Nebraska, and is attracting large crowds. It measures 6 feet, 1¼ inches in height, and weighed in life probably about 100 pounds. The feet and hands are small and shapely. The right arm is off halfway below the elbow, and the right leg is off halfway from the knee down. These parts were not found with the body. The remains, nevertheless, weigh about 300 pounds. Agents of museum managers in New York City are now here endeavoring to secure the remains of Wild Bill, and they have offered a large sum for the petrified body of this noted scout. The remains were removed to their present resting place on Mount Moriah by Charlie Utter, Colorado Charlie, the noted Western deadshot and gambler and partner of Hickock before his murder in this city by Jack McCoyle. Utter failed to pay for the lot in which the remains of his friend lay, and the cemetery company threatens to sell them to the New York Museum agents. So I'm sure that the New York Museum agents got the body of Wild Bill, and who knows, it's probably in somebody's Manhattan luxury apartment or something. Okay, so the next one, and I love this, from 1877, A Strange Story. The father of his country petrified to sandstone. The following from the San Francisco Chronicle may be all true, or it may be sensational. Washington, February 15th, 1877. We visited Washington's tomb today at Mount Vernon, Virginia, some 12 miles from this city, down the Potomac, and we had the unusual privilege of beholding the mortal remains of the immortal Washington. Visitors to the tomb will remember that the west wall of the same has for several years been in a falling condition and in great need of repair. A few days since, part of it tumbled into the tomb, completely covering the sarcophagus of Washington and also that of Martha Washington. In order to repair the damage in a competent manner, it was found necessary to remove them a few feet from their resting place. The one containing the remains of Martha Washington was removed first, but attracted no attention. But the unusual weight of the one containing the remains of Washington at once attracted the attention and aroused the curiosity of the official who was superintending the work and removal, and it was decided to open the sarcophagus in order to ascertain the cause of the same. This was done, and the remains were found to be petrified. In fact, a solid stone resembling a statue, the features perfectly natural, with the exception of eyes and ears, no trace of which can be seen. The body is of a dark leathery color and may be said something which would likely break should an attempt to be made to remove it from the sarcophagus. Edward Baker, an aged colored man who has resided upon the farm since he was a boy and who assisted in removing the remains from the old tomb to the present one, informs us that it is 38 years since their last removal. At that time, they had rested in the old tomb 38 years and were exhumed in a state of preservation beyond all expectation, being a solid, compact mass with the skin drawn tightly to the bones, petrification no doubt having commenced its work. The repairs to the tomb will be completed today, and the sarcophagus is not likely to be opened again for a century to come, unless indeed, in case of an accident, as in the present instance, and petrification will complete its work, and the remains of the immortal Washington will then be as enduring as his memory is dear. So, there is the immortal Washington, and he is petrified into sandstone in his tomb. And that was 1877. So 100 years, they said, would probably go by before they opened it again. 1977. I don't know. I wonder if anybody even knows about it still. I'm sure somebody does. Well, I still have a lot of time, so I'm going to just keep going about these petrified articles that I've found. This one is 1872. Mazzini's body to be petrified. Mazzini, eccentric in life, is the same in death, for his body has been turned over to a learned professor who guarantees to petrify it perfectly in 8 months. Professor Morini, says the Paris Liberté, whom we have personally known, and whose science equals his modesty, enjoys a great reputation in this department. He possesses a museum of bodies, that's nice, which we have often visited and examined with wonder and delight. Certain mummifying preparations give to the body the strange property of assuming all the appearances of sleep after being in water some hours. Others give to the body a hardness of stone and enable them to resist humidity and changes of weather. We recall the head of a cane of Dr. Morini, composed of a human eye, perfectly preserved, and of a hardness resembling crystal or coralline. Also many heads petrified, which, after 30 years, look as natural as life. The body of Mazzini, in the hands of this skillful operator, will escape dissolution and preserve the sublime expression of the last moment. If everybody could be thus preserved, the earth would soon be full, nay, encumbered with the dead, and then what would the living do for room? Well, that's a very macabre story. This Dr. Morini guy in France, and he's got a eyeball on the top of his cane and a bunch of petrified heads. Like, after 30 years he's been doing it, and where did he get the heads from? That's really strange. Okay, let's see, I got a few more minutes. A petrified Australian, and this one's from 1866. The London Daily News says that a petrified Australian male Aboriginal has just arrived in England. This singular specimen of petrification was found in one of the stone caverns which abound at Mosquito Plains, South Australia. It was lying in a natural position, as if having fallen asleep, and a Mr. Craig, who was in the colony at the time in search of curiosities, got possession of the black fellow for the purpose of adding him to his collection. Traveling with this singular burden wrapped in a blanket for nearly 100 miles, he reached Mount Gambier, where his movements attracted suspicion, and the Crown Lands Ranger, ascertaining that his bargain was a human being, sought the advice of a higher power and relieved him of his prize. An action of trover was immediately commenced, and Mr. Craig succeeded in obtaining a verdict with damages 1 farthing. The government, however, refused to give up the stone or other material, which was again placed in the cave. Mr. Craig, however, again went to work, and despite the heavy iron bars with which it was gnarled or guarded, and the hardships he endured, managed to regain it and brought it in safety to England. So yeah, they just go in and steal bodies, but look at all the petrified realm that these people were living in. All right, so that was 1877. This is 1864. Petrified bodies. An Austrian correspondent of an English paper writes, "In a stony creek 15 miles from Castlemaine were found the bodies of 3 aboriginals, quite whole and not wanting in the smallest details, but which were petrified into solid marble. When I last saw them, I thought they were actually alive, until on going closer I noticed the eyes. They are in a sitting posture, and the veins, muscles, etc., may be distinctly traced through what is now a group of stone block. They are in a splendid state of preservation. Even the fingernails, teeth, etc., are as perfect as they were 500 years ago. One of them has a stone axe by his side, without any aft." So, yeah, like I said, they're just finding them everywhere. Okay, now this is even earlier, 1855. A petrified Indian. While engaged in excavating recently upon the Milwaukee and La Crosse Railroad near someplace in Iowa, the workmen came upon the petrified remains of an Indian, and with the remains some singular relics of olden times. The body was perfect, not having suffered by decay. His height at the present time would be considered gigantic, measuring 7 feet 2 inches. On his breast was a plate of copper, on which were engraved numerous hieroglyphics, the meaning of which can hardly be imagined. But there they are, a record of the past. Could these hieroglyphics be read? They might perhaps unveil some of the mystery which hangs like a dark cloud over the history of the Red Man. An arrow of considerable strength and curious construction was also found with him, and especially invites the attention of antiquarians. What a crazy world back then. Okay, this one's from 1855, petrified wheat. A gentleman recently picked up on the Blue River, Kansas Territory, some specimens of petrified wheat. The resemblance is distinct, perfect. An inquiry comes up. Who raised this wheat? Who cultivated the teeming earth in that region in ages long gone by? Can geologists tell us? Perhaps this was the region of the globe referred to by Callinus, who once, in conversation with Onesectius, remarked that anciently the earth was covered with barley and wheat, as it then was with dust. Okay, don't know who they are. Okay, this is 1876. This might be the last one since it's a little bit long. That is kind of long. I'll try to read it fast. All right. Interesting discovery: relics of an ancient city in New Madrid County, Missouri. Captain Whitley had just returned from New Madrid County with over 100 more specimens of pottery and relics of the prehistoric residents of Missouri, which will be classified and added to the Centennial Collection. Captain Whitley and the party who accompanied him have traced the remains of a former extensive city, which show the evidences of having been densely populated. The city was surrounded by fortifications, the embankments with covered ways connecting the outworks of which have been traced for several miles. The remains of mounds serving either for outlooks to watch an enemy or as cemeteries for the burial of the dead, in which are found skeletons associated with drinking vessels, are also found distributed about the area of this ancient encampment. The indubitable traces of the dwellings, streets, and avenues were also traced over large portions of the grounds. And you wonder where we got the layouts for our first cities. The proper survey of which would doubtless tend to throw new light on the origin of these people. The houses were quite small, from 8 to 12 feet in diameter, and located about 10 feet apart. They existed in regular rows with streets and avenues running through the city at right angles and at proper distances apart, just like the ones now. The foundations of the dwellings, if not the entire structure, were made of a kind of adobe brick, of a red color like modern brick, but of coarser material. The brick, specimens of which were brought here by Captain Whitley, have transverse holes passing through, supposed by some to act as ventilators to the dwellings. As the bricks being laid flatwise in the wall, the sides of the house would be thereby pierced with the multitude of holes for the admission of the outside air. Another and more probable theory is that the bricks, in a malleable state, were pierced with round sticks for the more ready handling and burning, and the sticks, having burnt out, leave the impression of their form in the shape of a hole. Doubt it. The sites of these ancient habitations are plainly observed by a sunken depression of several feet in the ground, leaving evidence like that seen in the sites of demolished habitations frequently met with in the country in modern times. At first sight of these habitations, the observer might be led to believe that these ancient people lived in cellars and built their houses underground, but this impression will vanish on reflecting that the accumulated debris of ages has entombed these dwellings beneath the surface. Besides, on one side of the ancient city, there is still a lake or marsh, which at some remote period may have overflowed its banks, submerging portions of the site of the ancient city long after its extinction, and added its deposits to the accumulating debris. Somebody say mud flood? The site of this city is now covered with trees, mostly oak, of an ancient growth, showing that thousands of years have rolled round before the handiwork of these early Missourians were exhumed for exhibition at the Centennial, probably fair. The pottery brought up here this time by the indefatigable antiquarian, some of which was taken out on Saturday last, consists largely of drinking cups, culinary utensils, and bottles of a gourd shape. There are also rude trowels and tools used for fashioning and ornamenting the pottery, and whetstones for sharpening the stone axes and other instruments in use. But the fantastic character of the ornamentation of the vessels is what strikes everyone with surprise. There are very accurate figures of fish, frogs, hedgehogs, and such animals as existed at that time. Besides, among the feathered tribes are the goose, duck, owl, hawk, and probably the rooster from his comb. There are miniature busts of male heads carved out of clay, representing a type of face more resembling the ancient Aztec race than modern American Indian. But further and more careful inquiry is necessary before coming to any conclusion on this point, which would tend to settle the origin of these early builders and taxpayers of the state. So, yeah, we got lots of old growth over these cities that look like they were maybe cellars at first, but they were actually just covered with debris, like a lot of the United States and other parts of the world, hence the mud flood and Tartaria. What I'm thinking lately pretty much is that the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ happened, and then when Satan was released for this short season, all of this was covered and destroyed, and now we're finding the relics, and we're living in a very crazy and evil world. But there's still hope because there are good people that I know. I'm good. I'm sure you are. I hope you are. You probably know a lot. There's probably way more good than bad out there. So, with that thought, I hope you all have a great day and see you next time.